Hi, welcome to Prattski Game Reviews, Episode 3. This one's going to be a little bit different. I'm actually an avid disc golfer. I love playing. I've been playing for about 15 years, and I'm a member of the PDGA, Professional Disc Golf Association. And every quarter or so, we get a magazine in the mail called Disc Golfer Magazine. And I was flipping through and noticed a full-page ad for Dosh board golf, all the strategy of golf in a board game, and I knew I had to check this out. So I got a copy. This game was put out in 2015. It was made by Rick and Sean Capalco. I'm not sure if that's the correct pronunciation or not, but it's self-published. It's really, you could say it's golf in general, but it's definitely geared towards disc golf, and I'll show you more of the reasoning why that is. Hey, you might be wondering too, well, whether or not it's regular ball golf or disc golf, why is it called Dosh board golf? That was a bit confusing to me. I asked the guys, and they responded and said that they had the game concept, but they weren't really thinking about bringing it all the way through manufacturing, and they met a woman named Dosh, and she was the one that encouraged them to go through with the process, and that's why I got named Dosh board golf. So let's talk about it. Okay, so let's first talk about the negatives of the game, then I'll go into what I liked about the game, and then because this game, there's not a lot of information out there about it, not a lot of videos, I'll actually go through some of the rules and go through, I'll probably play a couple different holes just to kind of give you a feel for how it plays out and what it looks like and everything. So if you want to stick around for that at the end, that's great. So let's start with the negatives about this game. So I've got kind of two lists. One is general negatives as a board game player, and then the other is as a disc golfer. So let's start with the general. So out of the box, there's not a lot of variety in terms of the course. It comes with a single-sided board that's 9 holes with all the tee boxes and baskets or holes defined. And that's it. You know, I was thinking maybe there'd be an 18-hole course in there or something, and there wasn't. However, a game can take 30 to 60 minutes on 9 holes with two to three people, 4, maybe sometimes a little bit longer. So it's actually not a bad thing necessarily that there isn't as many holes, but at least it would have been cool to be able to play 9 holes one time, and the next time you get together, flip it over and play another 9. But there's also a positive to that, which I'll talk about more, but you can also, because it's a nice big board, you can really make up your own course with it. So there's a lot of flexibility there. The other thing is that it is dice rolling. You're going to be rolling numerous D12 dice to try to figure out what your distance is, if you curved it to the right or to the left, if you went over a tree, if you hit it or not, if you lose it, depending on where you land, and then also if you end up rolling down a hill, if you land on a hill or an elevation tile. So you can be right by the basket, one space away, and just roll terribly numerous times in a row. Last night I was playing with a buddy of mine, and it took him 4 rolls just to finally get it in the basket. And that kind of stunk. He just got really, really unlucky with his rolls. So that can sometimes be a bummer. However, I think too, as if you're not a golfer or a disc golfer, maybe that wouldn't matter as much because you're thinking less about the skill that you might actually possess out on the course and just more like, hey, this is a dice rolling game. There's some chance involved here. Maybe I'm going to get a great score, maybe not. But I guess the other part of that too is you could do 7, 8 holes in a row and you've just got this killer score going, and then you just get the worst luck on the rolls at the end and totally bomb what you had going for you. Oh well, but you go into it expecting that and you'll be fine. Another thing which is both cool and kind of innovative but can be a challenge is that this course is made up of what they call Dosh board cells. They've trademarked that too. And it's these interesting shaped cells, which you can see, and there are 12 different directions that you can travel. You can, there's the 6 of them make sense and look very obvious, but the other 6 are kind of traveling in between tiles. You still count it out, but it can be a little bit confusing, especially when you're going up or down elevation, to figure out where the not obvious 6 directions are actually supposed to go. It's definitely caused confusion with the people that I've played with at times. We eventually work it out, but I wish that was a little bit more clear somehow. But I think with the benefits that you get of this system too, though, it offsets the frustration occasionally there. And again, it's mostly only when you're going up or down elevations. Another thing is that, at least with the holes that they've predefined on the board, is that unlike an actual disc golf or golf course, when you get to the tee, you see an obvious fairway. Like this is where I need to throw it. You know, the hole is straight down this way, or it's going to go down and take a dog leg to the left or to the right. It's the line is there, and it's up to you to hit a good shot. In this game, the lines are not obvious, and in some cases, what seems like they should be the obvious lines are terrible because there's trees that you're almost guaranteed to hit. And so you need to find creative other ways to kind of get around the different trees and obstructions that are there and try to avoid the water throughout the course, which can kind of be challenging, and it sometimes for me felt a little bit annoying, like why did they design it this way? But on the flip side, I guess if you want to try to make that positive, it also forces you to be more creative with the lines. I suppose if this was set up in a way where all the fairways were totally obvious, then that's just the direction you'd go every time. And so I guess maybe kudos to the designers for not doing that and forcing people to creatively think of different routes to the holes. So that could be seen as both good and bad. Another thing on the general list is, and this is not a negative, this is more something that I feel like could have been interesting to add, would be like a campaign where you have a golfer who starts at a certain level, and there would be different ways that you could maybe increase your experience, and then the different cards that will serve as your discs or your clubs, there's ways that you could make those better and more accurate as you go, and maybe you could play some tournaments and things like that. I feel like that might not have been too hard to include, and maybe they could even do it in the future as an expansion or something, but that would be an interesting way to see progression and to keep you wanting to continue to play this game. That could be cool. Anyway, so let's keep going now. This is from the disc golfer perspective. As I mentioned before, it's dice rolling. And so I've been playing disc for 15 years or so, and I'm pretty consistent now. I know what my discs are going to do, whether they're going to turn left or turn right. When I'm putting, I know that within a certain distance, if I miss the putt, I'm guaranteed to get my second putt. And in this game, you have to throw that away a little bit. Throw away your own personal abilities and just realize that it's dice and it's not necessarily up to you. You can try to make the routes as smart and safe as possible to avoid the water and the trees and things like that, but it's really going to come down to the dice. Another thing is that in actual disc golf, I've got certain discs that I know are, if I throw backhand, they're always going to turn to the left. I've got other discs that they're almost always going to turn to the right. There's more consistency there in the disc behavior. Whereas in this game, with the discs that they give you, yeah, some of them have a better chance to go right versus left or left versus right, but there's still good enough chance that they could do either. So you can't predict the shot and the curve at the end or during the flight as much as you would hope that you could. So it would have been perhaps more interesting to have some more complexity in there where you could decide if you're going to throw it backhand or forehand, and that would change the final, curve direction of the disc, and the discs themselves would um, whatever curve options, and then I'll show you more about how that works on the cards. But whatever options are there will just change. Like they'll all be to the left if you're throwing it backhand, they'll all be to the right if you're throwing it forehand, type of thing. That would have been perhaps more interesting to me. But I recognize this is also for board gamers, so it is what it is. Another thing that I didn't like quite as much is that there's some pretty big distance variability on the different cards. So just as an example, this is a driver, and you can see that there's the possibility of getting 6 distance with this and 11 distance with this, depending on how you roll. And that's just, for me, when I'm throwing my driver, unless I'm gonna hit a tree or something just goes incredibly wrong, I slip on my throw or something, it's gonna be a pretty consistent distance. So the variability, I wish there was a better way to have some more control over that. And then the last thing is putting. Again, like I mentioned, if I missed my first putt, I'll make the second one. And in this case, you could do 4, 5, 6 plus putts if you continue to get really, really bad luck. And again, I wish there was a way to control that a little bit more, but there's not. But again, that's from the disc golfer in me, which, when I go out and I try to shoot a really good game, and you just have less control of shooting a really good game with this. But it's a board game, right? It's not actual disc golf. So let's talk about the things that I really like about this game. So first, it's unique. There's no other game like this. There's definitely nothing else that I'm aware of that is more geared towards disc golfers. So just for that fact, I think alone, if you are a disc golfer and you like board games at all, this is a great one to pull out every once in a while with either by yourself or with some friends and just play around a disc. So in its genre, good job making something that works pretty well. The board looks awesome. Whoever did the graphic design on this did a phenomenal job. The elevation looks really good. I mean, it almost looks actually 3D on the board. The grass, the trees, water, everything just looks really, really good. I was very impressed and intrigued with the board, and they just crushed it on that one. Flexibility in this game is really good. You can choose to play with the wind or just to not play with the wind at all. You can lose discs in this game, or you can choose to not lose discs in the game if you're playing with maybe younger kids and you don't want to get them frustrated with that sort of stuff. You can make up your own courses on the board that it comes with. You can pick your tee box, you can pick your basket or your hole, and you can totally make up your own courses, which that's really cool, and I actually really enjoyed doing that with my son. We are probably going to work towards trying to figure out how to use this board and to create our own course that we really like, that we'll continue playing and trying to get a really good score on. There is also an ability to fine-tune your shots a little bit, and I do like this. You can choose to -1 on your distance, or -2 on your distance, or +1 or +2 on your distance. So if you know that you just have to get that little extra, or the low end distances on your disc are going to be water, and so you want to totally reduce that chance of getting in the water, you can boost that up and try to just completely avoid it, which is cool, and I really like that. So it's in a sense likening it to, let's say I've got my mid-range disc out. It's not quite a mid-range, but it's a little bit more than a putter. I'm just going to dial it down and not throw it as far. You can pretty much kind of do that with this, and you select that before each shot. What's also kind of cool about it is that if you do choose, especially on the increasing the power of the disc, you are also subject to more curve effect on your disc at the end of your shot, because you count the distance, and then you look at how much it curved to the left or right, and you're increasing that amount at which you could go left or right with that disc. So it's kind of a high risk, potential high reward if you throw well. So that's cool. I really like that. It's easy to learn. It usually takes me about 5 to 10 minutes to show somebody the general rules, and then once we get 1-2 holes in, they're like, okay, I got this. It makes sense. And it's also nice because they have these reference cards that come with it that show you pretty much everything that you need to normally reference in terms of what happens when your disc lands on this, if you lose it or not, what you had to roll, if you're going to hit a tree or not, if your disc is going over a tree, and also the negative, the subtraction on your distance that you have to do when you're throwing out from a big tree, small tree, regular tree, or the mud. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, very easy to learn. My 11-year-old has no problem playing this game. He totally gets it and really enjoys it. So that's been great. Another thing that's been cool, and I didn't notice it at first until I actually started playing with the different colors, because there's 4 different colors. And so here's the all cards, and I did it the wrong way, so you can't see the colors. So you've got green, yellow, red, and blue, and each color has 8 discs or clubs. 2 putters, 2 mid-range, 2 driver, and 2 max driver. And they're all slightly different. They're not hugely different, so there's nothing major between them. But, just as an example here, so the biggest max driver for blue has an average. They give you an average distance here, just calculated on averages of what you could possibly get, of 9.75, and the red has an average of 9.92, so the red probably throws a little bit further in general. Yellow has 9.83, so there's slight variations in what they do, which kind of makes it interesting, and I like that. So no 2 players are going to shoot the same exact shot and necessarily have the same results, even with the same numbers rolled. So that's really cool. Another thing that I like about it is that you can lose discs, which actually in the past couple of months I've lost 2 actual discs out playing disc golf. So that is a very real possibility when you're out playing. And the way that it works in this game is that if you land in a waterfall or water or trees, I guess if you fly off the board, it's a guaranteed disc loss. But depending on what it is, you have a higher or lower chance to actually lose your disc, not be able to find it. Then you need to take a penalty, which again is normal for golf or disc golf, and then take your next shot. And that's really cool. And I'll cover this in a little bit, but it shows here, like when landing on this, a table that shows you what you have to roll on the white dice to determine if you've lost your disc or not. So I like that. And when you lose a disc, you actually have to take that card of the disc that you threw and set it aside for the rest of the game. You don't get to throw at that disc again. I had a friend of mine who lost both of his mid-range discs, and that made it quite difficult for him to finish the last couple of holes with any sort of success. I think he got pretty high scores in the last couple of holes. So that's pretty cool. Another thing that's cool is that you do have the chance to risk it, shooting your disc over a tree to see if you hit it or not. Most of the time you are going to hit what you're throwing over. For the regular trees and the big trees, it's a very low percentage that you'll actually get through. But it's still there, and that's kind of fun and fairly realistic. And then lastly, one thing I like is that they do have elevation here. There's 3 different levels of elevation, and when you're going up elevation, it takes more distance, and when you're going down elevation, it takes less distance. So there's an element of realism there, depending on where you're throwing from, if you're throwing up or down or whatever. and that's pretty neat. One thing especially that's interesting there is that if you are throwing up to a hole, I'm thinking hole number 7. I'll see if I can show a picture here of that, but it's really kind of up on a hill, and if you are throwing up the hill, and your disc ends up curving to one side or another, it could actually go quite far down the hill, which has definitely happened to me a couple times. So you got to be careful with that, and I really enjoyed that. It's a pretty cool challenge, and it causes you to try to take less risk when dealing with terrain. So overall, I think that these guys did a really great job thinking about this and the mechanics involved and putting it all together. I mean, really, you really probably just have to dial up the complexity quite a bit to make it more of a disc golf simulation. So from the perspective of it's a board game that's accessible to anybody, disc golfers or not, or regular golfers or not. It's very easy to get into. Okay, so that's my thoughts on the game, the good, the bad. But now that we've covered all that, let's go into what the actual rules are and what the components that come with the game are and what the gameplay actually looks like. We'll play 3 holes and kind of walk through what everything does and how it functions. And then I'll share a couple closing thoughts at the end. We've got most of the board in view here. There's just a tiny little section that might be cut off slightly, but we're dang close. So let's talk about first what comes with this game. So as you can see here, this is the course board. It comes with these 5 12-sided dice, these 2 tokens to mark whether you're going to increase or decrease the power of your shot. This track right here, we didn't use this much. We just didn't find it beneficial, but on every card, you can see that there's, on the red section, that there's white squares and red squares. And in order to actually have a chance of landing it in the hole or in the basket, you have to roll one of the values on the red die that corresponds with one of the white circles. On the drivers, on the bigger discs that go further, there's usually only 1 or 2 of those. On this track, you can instead choose to negate what those are and choose a value of your own. And if you happen to roll, a 3 and you chose 3, then if you landed on the basket, it would go in. So kind of interesting. I don't use that much at all. I just use what's on the disc, since you've got a 1 in 12 chance anyway. But it's there, available if you want to use it. It also comes with these 3 tiles here. This is the basket marker, and then 2 arrow directional markers here. One you will use usually to set somewhere to mark the wind direction if you're playing with wind. And the other one you use for each one of your shots, because you get 1 opportunity to curve the disc in a direction of your choosing, as long as it's not more than 90 degrees. It comes with 4 different colored wooden tokens here for the 4 different golfers that correspond with the colors on the cards. It comes with this deck of all the different discs or clubs. For this, I'll be using red. And the manual is it's not too bad. It was pretty easy to read through and figure out all of the rules and everything. They've got a lot of good pictures and stuff in there. My only gripe about this, and it's really not that big of a deal, is the wind table for determining the strength and direction of the wind is in the rule book here, as is the tide table, which only comes into play on the expansion board. But it would have been really great to have those on this reference board, or at least on the back. So you do have to either memorize that table or reference the actual manual. Not that big of a deal. But it does come with 2 of these reference boards to put on the table for not having to remember that stuff off the top of your head. And then it also comes with a small pencil and a bunch of scorecards that you can use for keeping track of your score. And it also shows the distance and par of each of the holes that come already laid out on this board. So a little quick rundown of the rules. So every shot that you do, you're going to be rolling all 5 of these dice. And they all do something a little bit different. So let's just pull out a card here. So this is a driver. And you can see in the middle, these gray things here, these are the dice values. And then the blue above is the distance. And the red below is how accurate of a shot it is. So for what's on the card, you make a roll and then you just check out the table. So I got a 3 on the blue, which would mean I got a distance of 7, and I got a 1 on the red, which would mean that this disc is going to curve to the left 1 space. Okay, I'll show you how that works when we'll play a couple holes here to kind of play that out. It's also kind of cool too. They gave a little chart showing all of the possibilities that could happen based on all the different rolls with this particular disc. So as you can see here, it's got more of a tendency, I guess more of a chance to curve to the right than it does to the left on this particular disc. Okay, so that's your blue and your red dice. The other 3 dice, this green one here is going to be your, not chance, but if you hit if you hit a tree or not. So there's small trees, regular trees, big trees, and of course the basket. There's a small chance to hit that as well. And small trees, these clumps of 3 here, you won't hit those if you're throwing over those, so you don't have to worry about those. But in terms of the tree and the big tree and the basket, as referenced on the sheet here, if you roll a 1 on your green dice, you're going to miss the big tree. But at 2 through 12, you're going to hit that tree. So huge chance of hitting the big tree if you happen to go through it, which these are the big trees here. I don't know how well they're coming through on the video. Hopefully not too bad. The regular trees, you're going to hit that on a 5 through 12 and miss on a 1 through 4. So still a pretty big chance of hitting it, but if you want to try to take the risk, you could certainly go for it. You know, that's a 1/3 chance of missing that tree. And then if you happen to be, you know, shooting towards your target, your basket, your hole, whatever you want to call it, if you want to try to go for it and hit it, you'd have to roll a 12 to hit it. A 1 through 11 will miss, and you'll go beyond the hole. So fairly, I would say, fairly realistic chances in terms of the mathematics behind this. So I think they did a good job there. So that's your green die. The white die is going to determine whether or not you've lost your disc. So you've got a chance to lose it if you land in the small tree, the regular tree, the big tree, the water, or the waterfalls. And again, this chart shows you what that is here. So when landing on, I guess you do have a small chance of recovering your disc if you go off the board. So you have to roll a 1 on the off the board, waterfall, and ocean surf. This board doesn't have ocean surf, that's for the expansion board. So very low chances of not losing your disc when landing in those spaces. Landing in the water, you've got a 1 in 3 chance of not losing your disc. Big tree, little over 0.5% chance, a little over 50% chance of not losing it. And then tree and small tree, very low chance of losing your disc. So that's pretty cool. And that's, again, only going to come to play if you are actually flying over a tree. No, I'm sorry. That was the green disc. We're talking about lost discs. This is if you're landing on those spaces. We already talked about if you're flying over those spaces. And then lastly is the black disc. And this one comes into play only if you are landing on a space that is right next to an elevation change, which you could possibly have the chance of rolling downhill, essentially. And they came up with a pretty cool system in this game. The chart is right here, but think about it like, think about it like a clock. So, and actually the video is kind of upside down here, but this is on these Dosh board, what are they called again? Dosh board tiles? Oh, I forget. Whatever they trademarked, but on each of these spaces here, 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way around. It's like a clock. And whatever number this is corresponds to a direction. So in the case of landing here, if 12 o'clock is this way, then if I get a, so this would be a 1, this would be 2, I'd still be safe. 3, I would roll down. 4, I'd roll down. 5, 6, this is 6, and 7, I would be safe. So 3 through 6, if I rolled a 3 through 6 on this, I would have to roll down 1. Otherwise, I rolled an 11 here, which would be this direction, so I would be safe from rolling down. If I did happen to roll down, if I'm on another space that's also going down, I'd have to roll again and determine if I would go down. In this case, I rolled a 3, which is this direction, so I'd roll down yet again. I landed in a tree. I'd have to see if I lose my disc or not. So it can get really interesting. So that's the different discs or dice. There's also wind that comes into play, and that is something that's determined before the round starts. With the table in the rule book, you'll figure out how much, like how strong it's blowing, and then which direction it's going to be blowing for the duration of the round. And the way that that works is, I guess I'll just give an example here. Okay, so let's say we've got a medium wind, and this would be if you rolled the dice at the beginning of the round and rolled a 5 through an 8. It says application 1 for every distance of 4. So if I shot, if I had a shot that went, let's just say an example here. The wind is blowing this direction here, and if I shoot, let's say 8, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and I land right there, I would then, so you count your distance first, the blue, then you apply any of the inaccuracy, or I guess I don't know if they had a terminology for this, but you'd apply this next. So maybe I curved it to the right a little bit. So let's say I curved it one space to the right. Then I look at the wind. I moved 8 spaces. This says it applies 1 for every 4. So I moved 8, so that's 2, and it's going this way. So I would have to move 2 spaces in this direction, and that would be the final landing point of my disc. So you count distance, then apply the red, then apply the wind. For this example, I suppose we'll just kind of take wind out of the picture for now, just to keep it a little bit more simple. Let's see, get my discs in order here. And okay, so the first T is right here. It's T box number 1. And we'll use the tile to just more clearly mark the first hole. So this is a nice short hole. It's right here. And so what I'm going to do, it's my turn. I'm getting started here. Now, okay, I guess one thing I have to cover again, just to be sure, are the directions here. So you can move in one of 12 different directions. This direction here is pretty obvious. This direction here is obvious, but you can also move on the in-betweens. So if I want to move this direction, I can do that as well, which those directions are a little bit more harder to follow, but the way that that works is it kind of counts as 2. So this would be 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you have to land on one of the in-betweens, It's, you know, in between two tiles here, so you pick the one that there's more of, I guess. I don't know how to better explain that, but as you can see, the curve is going this way, so there's more of this tile. So I'd have to land on that one there. But anyway, so let's get started. So on this first hole, there is no direct way to actually get to the pin. At least not that I'm seeing here. So I could go this way. This would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Or I could go here and then curve this way or this way. Still, well, I guess I could possibly land on it this way if I curve it like that. However, if I land in this, you know, any of these spaces, that's off the board, and that would be a lost, most likely a lost disc. So why don't we just say I'm going to keep it a little bit more simple and conservative. I'm going to shoot down this way here and then curve it this way and then try to land right about in here. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So, you know, 8, 9, 10, 11 would be good. So I'm going to take a look at my discs that are available. I know I'm not using a putter or a mid-range. Okay, so driver here. This range is between 6 and 11. And the average likelihood is 8.25. That's about right. My other driver is a little bit more distance, but it actually has less curve as well, potential. So, but I guess if I end up curving it right, that's not so bad. So I'm gonna choose this driver here, and we'll see how that goes. So, got my club and shot all lined up here. We roll all the dice. Okay, so the first one to resolve is the blue, so that's 10. So that's going to be a distance of 9. So I'll count that out. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, nice and close. I rolled an 11 on the red, which unfortunately is 2 to the right. So to calculate the distance there, the disc was going this way, and so right is going to be that way, and so I'll count 2, 1, 2. So it's going to land right there. We're not playing with wind, otherwise that could have come into effect right now. I didn't hit or fly over any trees. I didn't land in any trees. I'm not on a surface or elevation tile that would be going down, so I don't have to even worry about the white, green, or black dice. My disc lands right here, and I'm in a good position for my second shot. So I'm going to pick the obvious one with this putter, where 11 out of 12 blue dice rolls are going to go 1. And I need to also, on the red die, get either a 4 through 9, not either, but I need a range of a 4 through 9 to have it actually land in the basket and make the shot. If I get 1 through 3 or 10 through 12, that will be a miss. A 1 through 12, or 1 or 12, that's going to actually curve, and I'll be one space away from the basket again. If I get a 2, 3, or a 10 or 11, you can see it's 0. There's no effect on whether it's going to go left or right. But it's basically, you got to consider that you throw the disc, it hits the basket, and just drops on the ground right by it. And what you do in that scenario is it's one shot to get there, hits the basket, drops, and then it's just a tap in. You don't even need to roll for that, but it counts as an additional shot. So let's see if we can just get it in for 2 and make our birdie here. Okay, so I got a 2 on the blue, which is great. See, here we go. I got a 12 on the red, so this is going to curve to the right, 1. So my shot would go this direction and then curve to the right 1, which, because the curve is that way, it would land here. So that was a total miss, and I got to take my third shot again. Okay, so we got an 11, which is the correct distance, and we got a 2, which is not a white square, but it is a 0. So I land there on my third shot, it hits the basket, it drops to the ground, tap in for 4, and I get a bogey. So that's an example where like I had a first great shot and just got really unlucky on the red dice rolls, and unfortunately went from a birdie to a bogey. But got a 4, so we'll move on to the next hole. All right, so the number 2 tee is right here, and our basket is out on this area surrounded by water. So this is a little bit more risky shot here. But the line that I like to take is going this way and then curving it right here. So we need to get 1, 2, 3, 4. This is going downhill, so it doesn't count as a shot. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So I want this, I want to get like a 10, because that's least amount of risk if I get a bad red roll. Still definitely opportunity for water and potentially losing a disc, but let's just go for it for the sake of this video and take a risk here. So what do I want? 11, 10, 9, 8, 7. I mean, that would all be fine. I don't want to go over 11. That would be water. So let's see. I actually think that, well, yeah, it's a tough call between these two here. Well, maybe this is the better one. Okay, so with these 3 discs, this one here has the least opportunity for bad curves to the left or right. There's only 4 rolls that could result in a movement of 1, and 1 roll that could result in a movement of 2. So I think I'm going to go with that shot right there, or that disc, and let's see what happens. Oh, okay, so we got a really bad distance. We got 6, and then we got another bad roll on the red, so we got a curve to the left of 1. So we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And here's where it really stinks, because it's 1 curve to the left, which would be this direction, and I'd have to go to this tile. So that just landed in the water. Now, I checked to see if it's a lost disc, and I'll pull out the reference here. I rolled a 10 on the white disc here, and so that is a lost disc, because I didn't roll a 1 through 4. So what I would do in this scenario is take this card and I just set it to the side, and I can no longer use that disc or club the rest of the game. So that really stinks. And especially because it's only hole 2. But you know, this is definitely one of the more riskier holes with water. So what you do then is you put your disc back out where it technically came in. So it came in from this tile, so I'm going to put it there. I have to take a penalty, so now I'm shooting my 3rd shot instead of my 2nd shot. So I'm gonna keep this same line here, throw it this direction and have it come here. So that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. So I want to get a distance of 4. Even 5 would be okay. So this mid-range here, I think, is going to be a pretty good option. Ranges from 3 to 5. That would be 3, 4, 5. Very little chance of any sort of curve at the end. So let's see if we can get this thing in. Save par. Okay, so I'm not going to do that. I rolled, oh wait, no, it's still not going to happen. So I rolled a 5, which is a distance of 3. So that's 1, 2, 3. And then a 3 on the red, which is a 0. So it just lands short. Then I'll take my 4th shot. I'll use this putter since I'm right next to it. The other putter, it has just a little bit more distance on it. See if we can get it in. All right, so we got a 4, which is a 1, which is great, and a 9, which fortunately is a white square, which means that it actually went in. So I got a 4 on that one. All right, so let's just play one more. See how this goes here. So we'll find the 3rd tee box, which is right here, and the basket is there. And all right, so let's pick our line. And just to kind of show an example, a couple examples here too. of where you have options and things that you can do. So I could go out this way and curve it down this line here. So that's certainly an option. It avoids any sort of water initially, because whatever card I choose is definitely not going to end up going short enough to be in the water. But I do run the risk of curving it to the right and getting in the trees. I wouldn't want to go this way because that's a big tree, and I'd have to roll a 1 on the green dice to avoid it. Otherwise, it'll just hit and drop. So I don't want to be in that. I could take this line here, which again, as I kind of mentioned as negatives, these kind of in-between lines can be tough to follow. But it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then I'd curve it this way, like that. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So it'd be a pretty long shot. Maybe potential risk of getting it in some water here. What is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So yeah, even on the longest disc that I have, there's a 1 in 12 chance at getting a 7 there. Now here's where I could choose to increase the distance value and completely avoid that 7. But it also makes all of these other values increase. So if I had rolled an 8 on the red and got a 2 curve to the right, it would actually be a 3 curve to the right. So that gets a little bit risky. So I'm not going to take that line. I'm going to actually go... Oh, I guess another thing I could do too is curve it real early and then come down this way. So you've got options, and that's one of the things I like about it. Even though the obvious line, which would seem to be this way, is not doable because of that tree. But, okay, so I'm going to go down this way here and see what happens. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11, since this is uphill, that would be 12, 13. So even if I got a 13 on my biggest driver, that wouldn't be too big of a deal. You know what? Let's just go for it. Let's see what happens. We're going to use the max driver here. All right, get these back in here. So, okay. Well, I'm glad I didn't go down this way with an unmodified shot, because that's a 7. So that would have been in the junk. And then I rolled a 9. Well, let's do our distance first. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then a 9 on the chart here is a curve 2 to the right. So it's going this way, so I need to turn, it's this direction. Now, it's 2 movement to the right, and so there's 2 things here. If this tree wasn't here, then I'd move the 1, and then it's 2 more to get up here, which I don't have that much movement, so it would actually just stop there because it can't make it up the hill. But there's a tree here, so the first thing I need to do, because it's technically still flying, I suppose, is check the green dice and see if I hit or miss the tree. In this case, I would actually miss the tree because I rolled a 1. You needed 1 through 4 on the regular tree. But again, because it's uphill, I would land there anyway. So I'm in a tree. Now there's an effect to that when throwing out of a tree. So let's determine our line first. I'm going to go this in-between route here and do a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's 5 spaces to the hole, but because I'm on a tree, you have to look at this when leaving table, and I need to subtract 3 from my shot. So it's going to cost me 3 just to even get out of the tree. So it's going to be 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 to get to the basket in this case. So I'll try to find a good disc for that. And I think this is going to be our best shot, this driver here. But there's some danger of overthrowing it for sure. But I'm still not going to modify it, because if I try to do less and I get a 6 or a 7, then I'm just going to be really short. So I'm just going to go unmodified here. Okay, so we got a 9 on the distance, which is 9. So I'm going to overthrow it just barely. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I am flying over the basket though, so I checked the chart and see if I hit it. I rolled a 2, which is going to be a miss. So I did not hit the basket. So then I go my distance of 9. I check the red, and that is an 8. That's a 0. So it doesn't get affected by that at all. So not so bad. I'm 1 away. And so what was that? That was my second shot. And so now my third shot, see if I can get par. All right, yes, this actually worked this time. So I got a 4 on the distance, which is 1, and a 9, which is just barely a white square. So that sunk it, and I got par. So that's the gameplay there. So you go ahead and you do all 9 holes and see how you did. And it definitely gets interesting. As I mentioned earlier, this hole 7 right here can be a pretty tricky one because you've got rolling downhill here, you've got a double potential roll downhill here, and you get potential to go off the board. So that's a really interesting one to me. This one and hole 2, which is surrounded by water, can definitely cause some issues getting and staying up there, or potentially lost discs. So that was Dosh board golf. This was really cool to see and to experience. It definitely has a couple of negatives, depending on how you look at it, but there's a lot of fun to be had, especially if you like golf, or especially disc golf. It's great. Like, you can play it with my younger boys. I think probably under 10, and actually the box says ages 10 plus, and so I agree. It can be a little bit complex to try to figure out the lines and the counting and make good decisions so you're not losing all of your discs all the time. But my 11-year-old loves the game. We really have a lot of fun with it together. My other buddies that I've played with have all overall liked the game, and it's just a good and easy one to pull out every once in a while that doesn't require a ton of strategy or anything like that. Like, you gotta think about it, but it's not too bad, and it's also interesting because while it's not a cooperative game, it's also not necessarily a head-to-head combat type of game. So it's you're just kind of trying to get the best score like you would in golf, and that's also kind of cool too. So for those who are really competitive against each other in games, this kind of takes some of that out of it. You're really kind of more focused on you and your score, rather than trying to do anything bad to other people or eliminate anybody. So I think that's really good. So I think it's a good family game. It's a good game for folks who enjoy golf, or especially disc golf. And overall, I'd say recommend it. Just know what you're getting into. Like, listen to what I had said about the negatives and the positives, and if that aligns with something that you feel would be fun to pull out every once in a while, then this is a great buy. Another thing worth mentioning too is that they do have this expansion course. Really, it's just an additional course. It doesn't come with anything else other than some additional rules with a couple of different new tiles. There's ocean tiles, and there's a tide element that will come into play at the beginning of the game. So similar to wind, this will add tide. So muddy tiles become water tiles, and it changes some different things and can make it harder. So I'll be doing a separate video on the shoreline course for that. But as far as this goes, it's great. These guys did a really good job with it. You can get it, I don't think you can get it on Amazon, but you can go to doshboardgolf.com and pick it up there. So hope you enjoyed the review, and that's it for now. Thank you.